see you this evening for our Wednesday evening prayer service, and I hope and trust that the service will be a blessing to you. We'll start off by singing 495, and the words will be on the screen. Serve the Lord with gladness, first and last verse. Let's stand, please, as we sing. Serve the Lord with gladness in our works and ways. Come before His presence with our song of praise. Unto Him our Maker we would pledge anew life's supreme devotion to serve us true. Serve Him with gladness, enter His courts with song. To our Creator we would belong. Great is His mercy, wonderful is His name. We gladly serve Him, His great name proclaim. Serve the Lord with gladness, this shall be our theme, as we walk together in His love supreme. Listening, ever listening, for the still small voice, His will for precious will be our choice. Serve Him with gladness, enter His courts with song. To our Creator we belong. Great is His mercy, wonderful is His name. We gladly serve Him, His great name proclaim. Thank you. Be seated, please.
Thank you, Pat and Patsy. Appreciate that. Good evening to everyone once again. Good to see you tonight. Hope you've had a good day, and we look forward to sharing in God's Word together here in a few moments. Just by way of announcements, want to remind you there are a couple sign-up sheets on the table back there. First sign-up sheet is nursery volunteers. The details about that are on the sign-up sheet. I know we need nursery volunteers for Wednesday evening and Sunday school. So we're trying to have nursery available for our Wednesday evening Bible study time as well as Sunday school. So if you can help us out with that, or if you have questions, just ask Mary Ann, and she'll take care of that, answering your questions for you. Then the other sign-up sheet back there is the High Point Rockers game, August the 15th. The deadline to sign up is Friday. Okay, the deadline to sign up is Friday. Currently, if you take me away and my family away, there are 3 people signed up. And so I'm telling you this, if I don't have at least 10 sign up, we won't be going, all right? So the deadline to sign up is Friday, so obviously, unless you plan on being here Friday, or you could text me and say, Pastor Josh, put my name down, sign up tonight if you are wanting to join us for the High Point Rockers game. Details are on that sign-up sheet as well. So those are the announcements. Don't forget Sunday school, Sunday morning 9:45, our Sunday service at 11 a.m. And we look forward to what God has in store for us this Lord's Day. We are going to go to Lord in prayer at the end of our time together. So when our Bible study is done, we'll close down the online portion of our time, and we'll just spend some time praying together here in the fellowship hall. But welcome to those that are joining us online, and again, welcome to each one of you here tonight. If you want to open up your Bibles to Proverbs chapter 1. Proverbs chapter 1. I was asked by one of the young people where to turn tonight, and I said Proverbs, and they said, what chapter? And I said all of it. And then they said, how many chapters? I said, there's 31. And then they said, are we going to cover all 31 chapters? No, we are not. But Proverbs is thematic, and so we're going to cover a particular theme in the book of Proverbs tonight, and not just tonight. So I'm speaking tonight, and then I'll be speaking again in September, and then I'll be speaking again in October, unless Pastor Steve gets sick or something. I'm scheduled to speak on Wednesday night 2 other times. We're going to do a series through the book of Proverbs centering on the fool. So the title of this series is I Pity the Fool. Now, for some of you, you know what that refers to. For the rest of you, you don't. That's Mr. T. So Karen Robertson, she asked if she could have creative license, and I said, I don't care. And so she gave us a picture of Mr. T, who in the 80s, he was famous for the tagline, I pity the fool. Now, one thing, this is not connected to my Bible study, but I understand that Mr. T is a follower of Christ these days. You can see him on different shows, talk about his walk with the Lord and his faith in Jesus. But regardless, we're entitling this in this series, I Pity the Fool. And we're going to introduce the fool tonight and what Proverbs has to say about the fool. So before we do that, some questions for you to consider. Who is the most foolish person you know or have ever known? So think to yourself, who is the most foolish person you know or have ever known? And then the second question is similar. What made or makes them fools? Now, when we think about the idea of a fool, I want to give you some of entertainment's biggest fools. All right? When we think about the way a fool is portrayed in popular culture, foolishness is usually intellectual lack, silliness, goofiness, and almost lovable. You almost pity them all. So here's some examples. The Three Stooges, okay? Then there was a movie in the 90s, and whenever I mention movies, I'm not endorsing the movie. I'm just saying this is an example of the fool. I got to say that. Put an asterisk by it. Dumb and Dumber, okay? Lloyd and Harry, okay? And then Tim Conway on the Cara Burnett Show. Don Knotts, Barney Fife, and the Ghost of Mr. Chicken. That's funny. And is it the fastest gun in the West or the slipperiest gun in the West? That's another one, Don Knotts. Then Forrest Gump. And then there was another movie in the 90s, Tommy Boy. Okay? So these are examples of what most people, when you think of a fool, this would be the picture in their mind. Again, intellectual lack, silliness, goofiness, almost lovable. So I'll center on Don Knotts, Barney Fife, and Andy Griffith. He would fall under the category of intellectual lack, silliness, goofiness, and maybe Gomer Pyle would be a better one there. But they're lovable characters. When you're watching Andy Griffith, you're poor thing. All right? So foolishness is something to be pitied or almost, oh, how sweet. Then the dictionary definition of a fool, a person who lacks sense or judgment, a jester, a dupe, an idiot. Okay? And then another definition, to spend time idly or aimlessly, to meddle or tamper thoughtlessly or ignorantly, joke, deceive, fritter. All right? So in any of these definitions, whether it's pop culture, you think about Don Knotts, Tim Conway, whatever, Dumb and Dumber, whatever, or the dictionary definition of a fool, I have not as yet really described anything that anyone would categorize as serious or dangerous. Again, many times the fool's entertainment, they're lovable. Okay? They're adorable. You pity them. However, when we look at the theological definition, which is what we're going to do from Proverbs, It's a whole different story. Okay? A whole different story. All right? So I'm going to read you a definition. This comes from the International Standard Bible Encyclopedia. Okay? And it's the word that's translated fool in the wisdom literature. Okay? This word was their significance is best seen in contrast with wisdom. So the word fool and folly, all through Proverbs, there's a contrast with wisdom. And this was the outcome of careful observation and long pondering on actual life in the light of religion and the divine revelation. Wisdom, so here it is. Wisdom had its seat in God and was imparted to those who feared him. Such wisdom was the essence of life, and to be without it was to walk in the way of death and destruction. And now here's the fool. The fool was he who was thoughtless, careless, conceited, self-sufficient, and indifferent to God and his will, or who might even oppose and scoff at religion and wise instruction. So the fool, theologically, is someone who is indifferent to God and his will, and they might even oppose or scoff at religion. In Proverbs, in some passages, and we might look at some of those, in the parallel, it'll equate a scoffer with a fool, meaning they're the same thing. All right, here's another definition from logos.com. Proverb presents the fool not as someone lacking intelligence, but as a person characterized by recklessness rather than limited intellectual capacity. The fool's defining feature is fundamentally relational, a rejection of wisdom and God himself. So theologically and biblically from Proverbs, we're not talking about someone who's intellectually challenged or silly or goofy. We are talking about someone who has rejected wisdom and God himself. And then one other definition, all right, the Complete Word Study Dictionary. Foolishness is an adjective, or fool is an adjective meaning foolish in the sense of one who hates, not just scoffs at, but hates wisdom and walks in folly, despising wisdom and morality. So it's not just someone who lacks intelligence or is silly or is goofy or isn't paying attention or is entertaining or should be pitied or even lovable. No, the fool, as we're going to see in Proverbs, biblically is someone who is fundamentally rejecting wisdom and God himself. Okay? That's a lot more serious than Don Knotts, on Andy Griffith or Tim Conway on the Carol Burnett show. We're talking about something very serious in Scripture. Why do we know that it's serious? In Matthew 5:22, I'm just going to read this verse to you. Jesus says, "But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council. And whoever says, 'You fool,' will be liable to the hell of fire." So Jesus is saying to call someone a fool makes you liable to hell, which means calling someone a fool is serious business. You're basically saying that person is walking away from God. They're in open rebellion to God. All right? So this isn't just some passive, this person's clumsy, but this is a rebellion against God. All right? It's serious because of the biblical portrait that is painted of the fool. A fool is much more than a person who lacks common sense or intelligence. Okay? One author, Paul Tripp, he put it this way: fool is a spiritually blind person. He thinks he sees, he thinks he is wise, and understands when he is really blind, foolish, and confused. And that's going to be a key feature from Proverbs about the fool. They think they know, but they don't. Okay? They think they're awake, but they're fast asleep in their rebellion against God and his wisdom and their hatred of it. Okay? So tonight we're going to explore 4 pitfalls of playing the fool. 4 pitfalls of playing the fool. And then the next time we're together, just giving you a little heads up, we're going to look at the words of the fool, and then in October, the friends of the fool. But tonight, we're just introducing this idea of the fool, and we're looking at the 4 pitfalls of the fool. So the key verse, there's 2 key verses actually, Proverbs 1 and verse 7. Proverbs 1 and verse 7. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. Do you see that? The deliberate rebellion against God. It's not just that they don't understand God's wisdom and instruction. It's not that they're unaware of it or it's too difficult for them to grasp. No, they despise it. They hate it. Okay? As opposed to walking in the wisdom of God, they despise it. And Proverbs, right out the gate, tells us that this is the key marker of a fool. They despise God's wisdom. Okay? They hate it. Really, verse 7 of Proverbs chapter 1 is kind of the theme verse of the entire book of Proverbs. Proverbs is, of course, is wisdom literature, and each proverb or 2 or 3 can be taken as individual teaching units. So it's not like an epistle in the New Testament. And so that's why we're going to be jumping around throughout Proverbs looking at the marks of a fool, or as I said, the pitfalls of playing the fool. Another key verse is Proverbs chapter 12 and verse 15. Proverbs 12 and verse 15. The way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man listens to advice. And primarily, what's the advice that the wise man listens to? The instruction and wisdom of the Lord. Whereas a fool despises that, and the fool, or the way of the fool, the path that he is going is right in his own eyes. This is a key feature of the fool. All right, so again, the goal of Proverbs is to teach you and I how to walk in wisdom, or how to live rightly. Okay, what's the correct path to live? And the way to learn that, how do we learn to walk in wisdom? Partially is learning the opposite of wisdom, i.e. folly. Okay, so you can almost tell someone you're, raising kids or whatever, you could say, you see how that person acted and behaved? Don't do that. That instructs. So what should I do, Dad? The opposite of what that goofball's doing, and you'll be okay. All right? So there's a sense in which we're learning the way of wisdom by looking at the pitfalls of the fool. So if you want to be wise, don't be a fool because of these pitfalls. All right, so let's look at these. The first pitfall of playing the fool is fools are obvious and oblivious. Fools are obvious and oblivious. Proverbs 13 and verse 16. Proverbs 13 and verse 16. In everything the prudent acts with knowledge, but a fool flaunts his folly. Meaning that it's obvious when a fool is behaving foolishly. They flaunt their folly. Okay? They don't hide it, and it's obvious to observers that this is a fool. Proverbs 7, I hope you're ready to turn in the Bible tonight, because we're going to be looking at a lot of verses. Proverbs 7 and verses 6 and 7. Now in Proverbs 7, this is the entire chapter rather, is about a young man that goes by the home of a prostitute or a harlot. All right, so that's the context. Verse 6, for at the window of my house I have looked out through my lattice, and I have seen among the simple, I have perceived among the youths a young man lacking sense. Now remember, when we talk about saying the simple and lacking sense is another way of saying the fool.
This isn't someone who is unaware. This is someone who's deliberately going in this direction. And there's an onlooker, Solomon being the writer of Proverbs, who observes this, sees, and how does he know this is a simple person and someone lacking sense? Because they're going down the road that leads past the home of the woman that's going to destroy them. They see it. It's obvious. Okay? And then also, chapter 7, verses 22 through 23. All at once he follows her as an ox goes to the slaughter, or as a stag is caught fast, till an arrow pierces its liver, as a bird rushes into a snare. He does not know that it will cost him his life. The fool is not only obvious to onlookers, but he's oblivious to the destructive path he's on. So in these verses I just read, the analogy that Solomon uses is that all at once, this young man, the simple one, the one lacking sense, is captured like an ox going to the slaughter, or like a deer caught in a trap, or like a bird, and he's oblivious. The end of verse 23, he does not know that it will cost him his life. He's oblivious to his folly. Okay? He's oblivious to his folly. And he's oblivious to his folly, if you remember our key verses we read, Proverbs 12, verse 15. The way of the fool is right in his own eyes. He thinks that the path he's going down is the path to joy, satisfaction, prosperity, you name it. When in reality, he's oblivious to the fact that he's about to end up. Okay? So, the first pitfall of playing the fool, fools are obvious to onlookers, but they're oblivious. The individual who is living in a foolish manner is easily identified by others, but not to himself. Okay? And so we see the path the fool is on more clearly than the one on that path. And I'll be honest with you, in pastoral ministry, as a father, as a brother, as an individual that's interacted with people in ministry for 21 years now, and you meet with people, and you counsel with people, and you give people instruction, and you tell them how to get on the right path, and they nod, and then you talk to them in a short time later, and they've continued to do the very same thing. Or in pastoral ministry, I can't tell you how many times I've seen people raising their kids up in a way that's foolish. Right? There's no guarantees, Mom, Dad. There's no guarantees. You can stack the deck. That's how I put it. You can stack the deck, and the kid may still, go off the rails. There's no promise. But you see them raising, and it's obvious, and they are not aware of it. And then when their kid's older, rebels, and they come to you like, I don't understand what happened, Pastor Josh. I don't understand how that happened. Because they're oblivious. Okay? And that brings, maybe some of you in here have interacted with family members, or maybe co-workers, or maybe fellow church members. You try to talk some sense to them, and they don't listen, and that creates sorrow and frustration. Because it's obvious to you, but they're oblivious. That is a pitfall of the fool. Another example, this isn't in Proverbs, and we won't turn there. In Luke chapter 12, verses 13 through 21, the man that has all the wealth, and he says he's going to tear down barns and build more, and then he's going to sit back, eat, drink, and be merry, and God says from heaven, you fool! Tonight your life will be required of you. Your soul will be required of your hand. Why is that man a fool? Because he's oblivious to the reality of eternity. He thinks this is the right path. He doesn't know he's going to die. And that's sad. Okay? So, the fool. First pitfall, obvious to us and people walking in wisdom, but they're oblivious to them. The second pitfall of playing the fool is fools are worthless. Now, that sounds mean. Are you telling me someone's worthless? Yes! For certain particular reasons. Let's look at the verses. The fools are worthless. Proverbs 14 and verse 7. Proverbs 14 and verse 7. Leave the presence of a fool, for there you do not meet words of knowledge. If you need advice on how to make wise choices, young people, don't go to that foolish classmate or friend of yours who's always in trouble, always making a mess of things. No, you don't go get advice from the fool, because Proverbs says there you do not meet words of knowledge. Okay? So they're worthless in terms of giving you knowledge and help and counsel. So be wise as to who you ask to give you wisdom. Another place, Proverbs 26 and verses 6 through 9. And this one relates to hiring a fool. So if you've ever owned a business or had to hire individuals, or maybe not even hired, you were in charge of volunteers and trying to get volunteers to do certain things, and you put someone in a position and it just didn't go well. It may be that this person was a fool. Listen to how straightforward these verses are. Again, Proverbs 26, beginning in verse 6. Whoever sends a message by the hand of a fool cuts off his own feet and drinks violence. Like a lame man's legs, which hang useless, is a proverb in the mouth of fools. Like one who binds the stone in the sling is one who gives honor to a fool. What good is a sling if you swing the, we do it at nursing home, we sing Only a Boy Named David. Okay, only a boy named David, only a little sling, only a boy named David, but he could pray and sing. Only a boy named David. Only a rippling brook, only a boy named David, and 5 little stones he took, and 1 little stone went in the sling went round and round. You do it, and you go round and round and round and round and round and round, and 1 little stone went up in the air, and the giant came tumbling down. And you say, splat. Well, what good is a sling if the stone doesn't come out of the sling? And that's what this says. If you hire a fool, if you give a fool a job to do, you might as well take a sling and bind the stone. It's worthless. It's worthless, just like a lame man's legs, which hang useless. And so, the individual who is living in a foolish manner, and this is the pitfall, how are they worthless, cannot be looked to for help. So if people are living the life of a fool, which is to despise the wisdom of God, to walk in your own way, we should not give those people responsibilities in leadership. By the way, churches do this, organizations do this all the time, because a lot of times the fool has a great personality, and they seem like they're capable. And then they bring the whole organization to the ground. All right? Because they're oblivious, and they might have gifts in some other area that mask their lack of discernment and judgment. So fools are worthless. The third pitfall of playing the fool that we're going to look at tonight is fools are dangerous. So unlike Barney Fife, Tim Conway, Gomer Pyle, you pick your favorite Hollywood fool. Unlike these individuals who aren't intentionally dangerous. Now Barney Fife is, if you give him the 1 bullet and you want him to fire it beforehand, he shoots the floor and then shoots up through the courthouse and all. But put that aside. When we're speaking about fools being dangerous, the individual who is a fool is a danger to himself and others. The fool brings disaster on himself and everyone in his path. Look at these verses. Proverbs 17 and verse 12. How dangerous is a fool, Pastor Josh? Well, listen to this verse. Let a man meet a she-bear robbed of her cubs rather than a fool in his folly. You would be safer wrestling with a mama bear who just had her cubs snatched away from her than interacting with a fool. That's pretty dangerous. I imagine, I've never had the displeasure, I imagine in encountering a mama bear whose cubs have been taken from her is not good. Okay? And she probably gets pretty ornery. Well, the Proverbs, of course, this is hyperbole. It's better to meet that than to interact with a fool. The danger there. Proverbs 14 and verses 15 and 16. The simple, or another way of saying fool, the simple believes everything, but the prudent gives thought to his steps. One who is wise is cautious and turns away from evil. Notice the moral language there. One who is wise is cautious and turns away from evil. It doesn't say one who is wise has a high intellect or a high IQ or knows a lot of facts. No, this is moral language. One who is wise is cautious and turns away from evil, but a fool is reckless and careless. Not reckless and careless in the sense of doing stupid things, although a lot of times a fool does, but reckless and careless in terms of moral decisions. In terms of doing that which is virtuous, which would be honoring to the Lord, they don't take this into account. Big deal. I'm going to live my life my way. Because their way is right in their own eyes. And so they don't guard their heart as Proverbs commands us to do, because I've got it all figured out. They're dangerous. They're a danger to themselves and to everyone in their path. So fools are obvious and oblivious. Fools are worthless. Can't count on them. Can't depend upon them. Fools are dangerous. But then the last one, and we're not going to be in Proverbs for this one, Romans chapter 1, fools are all of us. Fools are all of us. All right, so I'm going to read a selection of these verses, beginning in verse 21. So, of course, the Apostle Paul, writing Romans, he's writing and describing what it looks like when men suppress the truth in unrighteousness. What does sinful man in rebellion to God look like? For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools. Now let's count together. Verse 21, futile in their thinking, foolish hearts were darkened. Verse 22, claim to be wise, they became fools. In the first two verses we read, as Paul's beginning to unpack what sinful humanity looks like, one of the key words that he uses to describe fallen man in rebellion to God is that they are fools. They're fools to be in rebellion to God. Notice what he says. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for the images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. And then beginning verse 24, he speaks about how God gave them up in the lust of their heart to impurity because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie. And then verse 26, for this reason God gave them up to dishonorable passions, and he speaks about sexual depravity. Then in verse 28, and since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind to do what ought not to be done. They were filled with all manner of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, malice. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, maliciousness. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, foolish. So listed amongst murder and haters of God and inventors of evil things is foolishness. This is not silliness. This is not lovableness. This is not being a simpleton. This foolishness, the pitfall of playing the fool, is it is open rebellion against God. Though they know God's decree that those who practice such things deserve to die, they not only do them, but give approval to those who practice them. And so, fools are all of us. Why? Because sin is a blinding force that makes all of us fools. Because sin convinces us that it satisfies, and it doesn't. Sin convinces us that it's the right way, and it's not. It's blinding, and so we all need, before Jesus, we are all fools. That's what I want you all to hear tonight. Before Jesus, we're all fools because we're darkened in our minds and we're in rebellion against God, right? And so we need the light of the gospel to cause us to see. You know, you're going down the wrong path, you're blind, you're oblivious, and then the light comes on. Whoops, I'm turning around and going this direction. I'm sure that's happened to some of you all in here, like in real life. You've been going this path, turn the flashlight on out in the woods or something, and you find it. When we were setting up the sound system last Friday for the movie night that we had, it was pitch black out there, and I'm out there. I got the speaker out of the choir room when you're out there. Well, someone came over with a flashlight because there's no way I was going to find the aux input with that thing. I'd have been fumbling around trying to find all these inputs, and at 9:45 at night, I needed a light. And when I had the light, then I was able to plug it in, and we had sound. Okay? The height of foolishness, though, is to disregard and despise the truth of God. All other foolishness flows out of this foundational foolishness, to despise the wisdom of God and to think I've got it figured out. It's a conscious rebellion against God. That's what a fool is. That's what it means to play the fool. So, we have to avoid fools. Yes, avoid them. We have to avoid foolishness, rebellion against God. We have to ask the Lord to deliver our foolish hearts from self-trust, because that's really a key marker of a fool. He thinks or she thinks they are okay. Or like the man in Luke 12, the parable, he thought he had all the time in the world. That's foolish. It's foolish, whether you're young in here or older in here or middle-aged in here, it's foolish to live as if we have all the time in the world. A wise person numbers their days, recognizes every day that I have as a gift, and they live accordingly. A foolish person thinks I have all the time I need. You don't know that. Ultimately, wisdom is found in trusting the Lord. And so I close with this verse tonight, Proverbs 28, verse 26. The way out of foolishness, if you're in the pitfall of playing the fool, whoever trusts in his own mind is a fool, but he who walks in wisdom will be delivered. So if you find yourself in the pitfall of foolishness, there is a way out of that pitfall, and that is trusting in the wisdom of God, which is ultimately trusting in Jesus and walking in accord with his word. So, do not play the fool. Do not fall into the pitfalls of playing the fool. Avoid fools, avoid foolishness, and trust the wisdom of God, which we know is Jesus. Would you pray with me? Heavenly Father, thank you for this time in your word tonight, and I pray you would take it and drive it down deep. And I pray, Lord God, that you would use it in our lives, that we might walk in wisdom, that we might avoid the pitfalls of the fool in our lives. Lord, search us and try us. And Lord, if there is any crooked way in us, put us on the straight path of wisdom.